Good evening and welcome to the Washington Week Extra. I'm Yamiche Alcindor. The 2020 Democratic presidential primary saw a historic number of women vie for the nomination, yet none of them made it across the finish line. Still, there have been history-making moments. In 2016, presidential candidate Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, though she lost the election to former President Donald Trump. A record number of women are also serving in Congress, and now we have the first ever female vice president in Kamala Harris. But the glass ceiling blocking the Oval Office still remains intact. Meanwhile, about 70 of the world's 195 nations have had a female head of state or governor, or head of government. So why hasn't the U.S. elected a woman president? And what factors are at play in this country? NBC News correspondent, my colleague, Ali Vitali, had a front row seat covering the 2020 election, embedded with Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign. Her new book, Electable, delves into these questions. I'm sure ABC would be happy to have you, but you are with NBC.
My contract says something else.
Right. So thank you so much for being here. So I want to just jump into your book, of course. I want to read a little bit of it. You say, the ceiling will not be broken in one shot. It will be chipped away at bit by bit, shattered crack by crack. It'll look like voters going to the ballot box and just voting for the person they think will be best. I think that's really powerful. So with that in mind, why hasn't the U.S. elected a woman yet?
You know, as I often joke, if the answer were just simply misogyny, this would be a lot shorter of a book. But the real answer is actually that structurally, just the way that we have our presidential systems, the very system of the Electoral College, the way that we do our primaries, but also just the ways that voters assess who's qualified, who's likable, and who's electable, all of that has gender swirling within the pot. And I think sometimes in our daily political coverage, we sometimes gloss over gender because it can't be quantified in a poll necessarily. And it's a lens that I bring to this book over moments that all of us covered and reported on together in 2020 because that primary field had more women in it than any other primary field before it. So it provided the opportunity to look at gender in a whole bunch of different ways with a whole bunch of different candidates. And ultimately, the result for all of the 6 women who ran was the same in that none of them got the nomination.
And you talk, of course, as you said, a lot about electability. I want to pull up another graphic. This is the second graphic. When voters or pundits or operatives wondered about likability or viability, what they were really asking about was electability. Can this person win? And gender informed those answers in an incalculable but substantive way, especially in 2020, when the question wasn't about just winning. It was about beating Donald Trump. And I remember on the campaign trail over and over again, people saying, well, we just have to figure out who can beat Trump. So talk a little bit about how that has impacted women running.
Well, it was a two-pronged question in 2020, but the thing that always blew my mind was there was electability on its face, which is a fair thing, I think, for all of us to ask of our candidates, and voters especially want to pick someone who can win, period. The concept of electability, though, can't actually be proven by anyone, male or female, until after the polls close and voters have voted. It's an unproven concept, and so the question really is, who are you giving the benefit of the doubt to? And I think more often than not, we see that male candidates were being given the benefit of the doubt, despite the fact that those women who were running, especially the last 2 standing, Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar, had winning records, had receipts legislatively of the things that they had done. Warren was running on plans. And then there was the Trump of it all in the 2016 and the Hillary hangover. And voters sort of assessed the fact that even though Hillary was supposed to win that election, everyone thought she was the most qualified person to ever run. The polls had told them, at least Democratic voters, that she was going to be the next president. When they saw that she had lost to Trump, it manifested in their minds as, well, one woman lost once to this man, and so it's an unsafe or a risky choice. Never mind the fact that Trump beat 15 men on his path to the Republican nomination, and no one ever asked the men, well, do you think a man can beat Trump?
Wow. No one asked that question that I can remember. It was which man can beat Trump?
Exactly.
That was what I heard. I want to say, you also say one of the most jarring pieces of research that you referenced was in Chapter 7, and it's the 2021 Stanford University study on gender dynamics. What struck you most about that study?
This study was amazing to me, not least of all because it came 3 weeks before I actually submitted the final manuscript, and I was so thankful for it because what it bared out was something that I had seen in real time in the primary, which was in the primary during Elizabeth Warren's polling surge. There was a poll done where Elizabeth Warren won if voters could wave a magic wand and pick whoever they wanted to win. And then they did a horse race poll in that same poll, and Joe Biden won it. And voters were asked, what could the magic wand candidate change to be seen as the horse race candidate, the person who could actually win? And respondents said gender.
Wow.
What this Stanford poll then did was, after the primary was over, it did that whole study again effectively. And it found that the idea of electability, not being able to trust that a woman can win, actually impacts her electoral bottom line, because people were actively switching their votes, not from the person who they wanted to vote for, but to the person who they thought could win. And in that thinking who could win is a lot of gendered undertones.
And was there any encouraging part of that data? Was there anything that left you thinking, okay, maybe this feels a little bit better for women, even if it's going to be harder?
Thank God, yes. Because what they showed in that study is that if voters are presented with disruptions of those gendered narratives, that in some cases, a percentage of them will stick to the candidate who is female or the candidate who they like in that instance. And so what it means is being aggressive, both on the part of female candidates, but also in media narratives. And I talk about the role that the media plays in all of this, is helping to disrupt narratives that are unlevel for the playing field for female candidates. And that's on media, that's on candidates, but it requires a strategy of being able to say, women win, here's why. And it's a question that all the candidates in 2020 were asked. They all gave answers, and ultimately none of those answers were apparently satisfactory enough for voters.
Wow. I want to also put up the one last excerpt from your book. It says, emotion, you write, emotion remains one of the most gendered and risky metrics in politics. All the women, whether their campaigns overtly said so or not, were challenged by this invisible, unpredictable dynamic to emote, but not too much, to attack, but not too harshly, to differentiate yourself from the rest of the pack, but not to offend someone while doing so. I mean, so many women read that, and they can, of course, you're talking about presidential politics, but you can be talking about lawyers, doctors, teachers. Tell me a little bit about your writing that, but also the universality of all of this.
I think everyone that I talk to for this, whether they're in politics or not in politics, just people I come across, understand that double-edged sword for women of being aggressive, of being ambitious, of saying what you want and going for it. Certainly, being president is not a job that anyone falls into by accident. And there was a really great op-ed that was written during the 2020 primary about the ideal or perfect female candidate, and I reference it in the book. And they conclude with the idea that she wants to be president, but she'll never tell you how badly she wants to be president, because she can't. And we saw women at each level of this process dinged in many cases for being aggressive, for showing ambition. It was aggression on debate stages that even in winning moments made it seem like they were somehow losing or being criticized for it. And then in the Veep stakes itself, all of these women self-advocating, talking about what they could bring to the table on this ticket. And then there were still operatives and open narratives in the press about, oh, these women are being too overt in their ambition for the vice presidency. Never mind the fact that multiple men have been vice president before, and no one has knocked them for saying that they want that job.
Talking about Veep stakes, of course, we should ask about the vice president, Kamala Harris. You write about the sparkly jacket. Remind people about what that is and also why you wanted to include it.
The sparkly jacket was a day where I was on the campaign trail with several other female reporters. All of us had covered presidential election cycles before, veteran journalists out with Kamala Harris as she was campaigning on Lady Street in South Carolina, the perfect place for a female presidential candidate to be. She tried on a sparkly jacket, and conservative white men on media, on Twitter, started reacting very badly to this idea of a woman doing a retail campaign politics stop, which you and I have covered hundreds of times with male candidates before. It's the bread and butter of campaigning for president. And yet when she did it, she went shopping, a stereotypically female task. She did it with female reporters. There was an air of unseriousness, apparently. And it was a reminder to me that even in just doing the job of being a presidential candidate, there are invisible pitfalls for these women that we are only just now still being reminded of.
And the last question in the couple seconds that we have left. After writing this, do you think it's inevitable that we're finally going to get at some point a woman who's president, or do you think that it's going to take a long time and maybe we might not see it in our lifetimes?
God, I'm really leaning on that yet there in the title, because I do think that we are coming closer. The pipeline is full on both sides. I think it means that you're not going to see primaries where there are no women running, and that is a big piece of this battle, even just to make sure that the field has women in it. And then, of course, the fact that the country would be ready, which, by the way, in 2016, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote. So it's not that they're not ready. It's just that the moment has not arrived yet.
Well, congratulations on this book. I don't know how you got it done running around Congress and doing all this stuff, but you got it done. Right, hopefully. The book, of course, is Electable. Everyone should pick it up, of course, and I look forward to hearing what you all think about it at home. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Ali, for joining us. Good night from Washington.